So joining us now to talk a little bit about the midterms, and like I said, 12 days away until Election Day, is Alex Wilkes, Executive Director of America Rising. And Alex, welcome back to the program. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So, like I said, we got 12 days left, and the numbers are great. I think I saw there was a story from NBC News recently that showed that I think 7 early voting states, and some of them are big swing states like Nevada, are actually seeing more Republicans are showing up early in voting. And historically, Democrats tend to do better in early voting. And so I'm not sure if that's a good sign or not, but it definitely shows that there's enthusiasm from the Republican side, which I know Republicans were worried about.
Absolutely. And it makes turnout operations a lot easier on Election Day because those, volunteers that are out there making sure that everyone gets to the polls, they can cross those people off the list because they've already voted. So it definitely expands the possibility of them reaching out to some other folks who maybe haven't gotten to the polls yet. So those are very encouraging numbers. I think that the president's approval rating, which is as high as it's been in a while, is also encouraging. And, of course, the strong numbers we're seeing out of the economy. That goes a long way to making people feel like it's not necessary to make a hard change, which is often what midterm elections are about.
Now, I'm glad you brought up the economy because, the stock market's been a little interesting the last couple of weeks. It was, down big yesterday. However, a lot of people aren't invested in the stock market and other signs in the economy. Jobless numbers just came out. U.S. weekly jobless claims about 215,000 versus 214,000 expected, but still overall good economy. Unemployment's down. But I just saw this. Medicaid enrollment declines for the first time in more than a decade because the U.S. economy is boosting income for poor Americans. And so, yeah, there are some stats like the stock market, like I said, which, 9 years of a bull market, eventually it's going to come to an end. But it's all these other signs with wages going up and jobs are available. I think people feel like the economy is better, and the economy is always the number one issue.
Absolutely. I mean, people vote their pocketbooks, I think, at the end of the day. I think what's important, though, going into midterm elections is what you want to make sure of is that Republicans and the president's base don't just think that they did their job in 2016 so they can kind of sit home this election day. You want to make sure that even though the economy is strong, which might sort of lull people into a false sense of security, given what's at stake in other areas of our public, discourse out there. You want to make sure that despite sort of the good economic numbers, the strong job numbers, that people feel motivated to come out to vote. But fortunately, I think that the Democrats have really done a great job of that for Republicans, starting with the now Justice Kavanaugh hearing. That was a huge turnaround moment, I think, for GOP enthusiasm. You really saw sort of like the tea leaves about what will happen if Democrats retake control of the House and the Senate. It would be nonstop impeachment hearings, both for Justice Kavanaugh and President Trump. There would just be nonstop investigations. And the next 2 years of the president's term would be pretty miserable. So I think that, Republicans are really starting to sort of see, why it is that it's so important to vote in these upcoming elections. And that's why you're starting to see the generic ballot close, particularly in some of these battleground areas.
Once again, we're talking with Alex Wilkes, of course, Executive Director of America Rising. And Donald Trump, the president, is coming to North Carolina. He's going to be in Charlotte on Friday. How important, from your perspective, are these rallies? Because, they seem people are very one-sided on this. They think that these are great. They're always huge numbers. I mean, he's one of the few politicians that can get people and fill out these stadiums in some cases. But some people say, maybe it's not the best thing if we're trying to win over maybe more of like the moderate voters, more the independent voters. Some of the things he says at the rallies get him in trouble. But like I said, they do cause a lot of enthusiasm among the base. So how important do you think these rallies are? He's going to be doing, I think, 20 or so in the next week. But he is going to be in Charlotte. Go ahead.
I think that the rallies are important because, like I said, in a midterm election, the one thing that you worry about is that your base is going to sit home. That basically the 2016 election was the big election. They feel like they have a big victory. Maybe even after the Judge Kavanaugh hearings, everyone got what they wanted, which is Judge Kavanaugh on the Supreme Court. So you worry that they're going to sit at home. And I think what the president is doing right now is he's taking to the campaign circuit and he's doing these rallies. First of all, it inserts himself into the news cycle every single time and kind of keeps the pressure on these red state Democrats in a lot of these places. So these are Democrats that are running in states that the president won in 2016. And it's just a constant reminder if he's out in Nevada, if he's out, campaigning in other places like North Dakota, that there are Democrats that are running in those states. And in their states, they're painting themselves as these moderate, reach across the aisle kind of politicians who are going to work with the president. But when they actually get to Washington, D.C., they vote a lot more like Chuck Schumer and Elizabeth Warren than they do in a more bipartisan way. So I think that the rallies really keep that at the top of people's minds. And, I think that it reminds the base, especially because he does bring up, I think, critical issues at these rallies, like, for example, impeachment. He's brought that up a couple of times. And, to be honest, that's not just an issue with the base that would fire people up. That's also an issue that we know from polling that independents don't like. And even people who disapprove of the president don't want to see impeachment. So it definitely brings up sort of what the future will look like under Democratic rule. And, I think for these middle of the road voters, they, might, pick some faults with this White House over certain things. But the real question that's being posed to them is it enough to change course? And I think that the Democrats, with their recent behavior, they're really sort of not making the case for themselves as a credible alternative.
Yeah, no, some of the ads are just ridiculous. Like, I'm going to go there and stop the gridlock. And even though they're claiming they're going to, first thing they're going to do is impeachment, which doesn't sound like it's going to stop a lot of the gridlock up there. So real quick before I let you go, Alex, what's your sort of projection? You think the Republican, a lot of people are arguing they're going to lose the House, might actually pick up some seats in the Senate. Do you have any idea, any projections on what might happen 12 days from now?
Well, I think the Kavanaugh hearings really solidified us in the Senate. And the Democrats, I think, at first were bullish that they were going to pick up seats in the Senate and defend the current seats that they have. I think that those dreams have been dashed. I think with the House, of course, the prognosticators are out there saying that the Democrats have a good shot to take the House. And quite frankly, the GOP over the last couple of midterm cycles, we've built up a lot of seats to lose.
Yeah.
And so, I think that they're numbers wise, there's just the sheer numbers of it. There are a lot of different ways to, for us to potentially lose, particularly when cases like the gerrymandering case in Pennsylvania went against us and really cost us some seats there. So, I think that the House, it's up for grabs. I do think, though, that we're in a much stronger position enthusiasm-wise than we were a couple of weeks ago.
Yes.
And I think the prognosticators are appropriately adjusting their expectations for this so-called blue wave accordingly.
Yeah, it is interesting to watch some of the Democrats now kind of like hedging their bets a little bit. Like, well, maybe we don't take the House. And even they're getting a little concerned about it. But Alex, as always, I appreciate you taking the time joining us here on the program. So thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.